Okay, so I was just knitting along in stockinette when I realized that I made a mistake a few rows down. I have a purl stitch instead of a knit stitch here. And of course, we could turn the work over and find here that I've got this knit stitch here, this little V that you can see instead of a purl stitch. We can fix this from either side of the work. I find it slightly easier to be looking at the knit side and fixing the purl rather than looking at the purl side and fixing the knit. So if you have the option, I would go with this, but it's not a big deal either way. Both are doable. Both are almost the exact same. So what you need in order to fix this is one of these like really tiny crochet hooks that I suspect is like exactly for this reason. I'm not really sure. This, for me, this came in this like box of notions that I got back when I started knitting. It's just got lots of stitch markers and some tapestry needles, some cable needles, and things to put at the end of your needle to stop the work from falling off. Yeah. Anyway, this came in there. I didn't know what it was for. I'm still not 100% sure. Anyway, one of these is really helpful, but if you don't have one, you can just use another knitting needle or like a paper clip that you bend over or a safety pin or a pin of any kind. It helps if it's like slightly smaller than the needles you're working with. That's going to make it easier, but really you can use anything. And then if you have a stitch marker, that is also helpful. It's not necessary, but it is helpful. And it's got to be one of the ones that opens that you can stick into a stitch after the fact. It can't be, basically, I gotta go get one from my box of notions. It can't be one of these that you would have had to slip on the needle while you were working, because we're doing this after the fact. So the first step is that I am going to I'm going to slip the stitch marker into the stitch below my mistake stitch, making sure to stay in the same column. Now, you don't have to do this, but it's a good way to kind of, it's like putting scaffolding up before you do some work. It's just going to help and make your life easier, but it's not absolutely necessary. If you don't have a stitch marker, that's fine. All right, so we've got our stitch marker. We've got it in the correct column of knit stitches just below the mistake stitch. If you put it more than one below, that's really not the end of the world either. If you put it above, that's just going to be useless later on, but then you can just move it down if you realize later that you've accidentally put it too high. So yeah, there's nothing you could have done at this point in the process that is not fixable. Alrighty, so now I want to get to this column that the mistake is in. So I'm going to continue knitting until I get to this column. You might think, well, why don't I knit backwards or unknit to get there? But there's really no point in doing that. It's not going to save you any effort. So better to knit forward because that's, progress, less time wasted, less effort wasted. But again, if there is some reason maybe this row is going to have an increase or decrease that's going to make this process tricky, then you might choose to go backwards instead of continuing. But anyway, I'm just going to continue knitting. Ooh. And yes, I am what they call a continental knitter, which means that I hold the working yarn in my left hand and I pick. This is called picking the yarn. See here, I put through and I pick the yarn, as opposed to English knitting where the working yarn is held in your right hand. I'm not going to demonstrate because I'm a terrible English knitter. But for those of you who do it, you'll know you hold the working yarn in your right hand and you basically like, I mean, maybe I'll try it. Oh, it's gonna be a disaster. I guess for a knit stitch, you would put this through and then put it around this way. Does it even matter which way you do it? I can't imagine it does. Anyway, you would, and that's called throwing the yarn. I like continental knitting because I think it is much faster and it's a much more subtle movement. So if you have like repetitive stress injuries, I think this is gonna be easier for you, and it will probably lead to fewer repetitive stress injuries as well. But it tends to be much faster, which is what I like. All right, are we there yet? No. Okay, so keep knitting. Okay, I think we're there. Okay, so we can see that basically I just wanted to get this stitch at the top of the problematic column on the edge of a needle. It doesn't matter which needle it's on the edge of. I just want to be able, I just need to get here so that I can take it off the needle. Okay, so we double check or even triple check that we are working with the correct column, the one that has the mistake in it. Check that a few times. It's worth double checking, okay? And then we slip it off of our needle. I know, seems very reckless, but I promise you it's going to be okay. So now, because I like to be super cautious, I am going to pull these needles through. I happen to be on circular needles here. If I wasn't on circular needles, I would add one of these to the end just to prevent my work from falling off the needles while I am fixing this mistake. Better safe than sorry, as they say. All right. So now it's kind of got a lot of stuff going on there. But, so now what we're gonna do is kind of undo this column. So I'm gonna slip, I hope you can see what I'm doing. Slip this guy off of here. Okay. Sorry, oh, klutzy. Okay. Then we're gonna slip. Maybe I should use the slightly larger side because I'm splitting a bunch of yarn here by accident. Okay, and we're just gonna go down the column, pulling the stitches out. I'm just kind of pulling the stitch over the top of the one below, if that makes sense. There's a million different ways to do this correctly. So you can do whatever works best for you. You've probably noticed that I have doubled up my yarn for this project. So that's just makes it a little bit more of a complicated example, but not too much more complicated. Okay, and here we are at the problem stitch. So we definitely want to undo that one. Don't get all the way down here and then forget to undo the actual mistake and set everything right again before that. Okay. Come on, little guy. Come on out. Okay. There we go. And so as you can see, this stitch marker is just going to help. Like, you could be totally reckless and just have pulled these apart to get them unknit. And if you choose to do that, this stitch marker, being that it is around, you know, the yarn, it will stop you from going too far down this column. So that's what it's for. It's just a safety mechanism. Okay, so now we get to work fixing our mistake. So because we want to do a bunch of knit stitches, I've got this little guy here. I'm going to put my little tiny crochet hook through from front to back, and I'm going to grab the yarn from the row above, which in my case is these two little strands. Actually, I want to grab it this way. Okay, and I'm gonna, this is not going as smoothly as one might hope. Okay, let's grab these guys, making sure I'm grabbing the right thing, and making sure I'm still on camera. Oh, I was texting. And then we, okay, and then we struggle. What is going on here? Is that not the right strand? Oh, no, it is not. Okay. Ah, Lordy, I had my working yarn get stuck in there. That's why I was getting some problems. Okay, so we get our little strands hooked in. That doesn't seem right. Let's undo that. I'm really making such a big mess, but don't worry. It will all turn out fine regardless. Okay, let's get this stitch back in good working order. Okay. Now we want these next two guys to come through. And we've ended up with splitting some yarn. Okay. There we go. This is not usually this difficult. I don't know what I'm... Okay, then so we've got that knit stitch after a lot of struggling. You can tell I don't do this technique very often. I'm going to try my other tiny side. Okay, so then we put... I'm really splitting yarn here, and it's making my life much harder. Okay. Then we put our little hook, more split yarn. Why is this happening to me? Okay. Then we get our next two strands on our little hook and pull them through. There we go. There we go. Okay, put this hook through there. Get our next two strands hooked on. And pull them through. Making sure not to split yarn. Okay. Put it through the stitch from the front to the back. Pull our next row of yarn and pull it through. Put in the loop from the front to the back. Grab our next row of yarn. And pull it through. Alrighty. Put it through the loop from the front to the back. Don't get your working yarn in there like I did. Grab the next row of yarn. Come on. And pull it through. Okay, we're getting there. Put it through the loop from the front to the back. Grab our next row of yarn, which again for me involves two strands because I've doubled up yarn for this project. For most of you, it'll just be one strand. Okay. Okay. Make sure not to get your working yarn involved at all. All right, from the front to the back, we go through, we grab the next row of yarn, and we pull it through. Then we grab our next row of yarn, and we pull it through. And now we can put this stitch back on the needle where it was before we took it off. Come on. Come on, little guy. Put it back on the needle. And voila, everything is right as rain. We can take this stitch marker out. Thanks, little buddy, for saving us from any disasters. And oh my God. And there we are. And when I can put my needles back in the work and just continue knitting. There we go. Mistake fixed.